getting paid $3,000 a night to stay in a haunted mansion. It sounds like the job offer of a lifetime, right? House sit a creepy old mansion for a year, become a millionaire by the time it's all over. But I knew things were never going to be as simple as they seemed. They never are when that much money is involved. My employer, Jeff, a guy I've only contacted via an IRC chat room, offered me a 5-day trial period before signing me up for a 1-year contract. That seemed like a reasonable request, and I'd be able to pay off the rest of my student loans with the money from that trial week alone. I would have thought it was a joke, until he sent me a $1,000 payment up front and promised to send the rest later. I knew I was getting into something shady. I expected to be house-sitting a house full of stolen goods, drugs, or worse. Jeff deflected all of my questions about the place, and when I felt like I was starting to piss him off, I knew to shut up. The last thing I wanted was for him to withdraw the job offer and give it to some other broke student. Monday, 3:20 a.m. I made my way to the mansion in the early hours of Monday morning to begin the trial. It was a misty night. I had no problem being there at this hour. I've always been a night owl. Still, I was 20 minutes late. Jeff waited on the street by the mansion gates to greet me. He kept his voice low but revealed a strong Australian accent. "You made it." About bloody time. I shook his hand and introduced myself, checking the place out at the same time. It was in a state of utter disrepair. The building had been neglected to a shocking degree, as if it had been left alone for 100 years. Otherwise, it looked like your stereotypical mansion with long white pillars by the entrance, and huge swathes of grass fields surrounding it. Jeff seemed to be in a hurry. "Now, I've done all your chores tonight, so just make your way to the basement and get settled in." "The basement?" Jeff pulled out a sheet of paper. "Right. I've got a full list of rules here, but for tonight you just need to keep quiet and make your way into the basement. Wouldn't want to wake the tenants. Always lock the basement door behind you. There's other people staying here. Ghosts, mate." I feigned a smile, thinking it was a bad joke or that Jeff was a lunatic. Nevertheless, I was determined to play along. The money was good. Jeff helped me get my bags out of my car, insisting I park it outside of the estate on the street. He handed me a key and a folded-up piece of paper in a plastic sleeve. "I've left the front door unlocked for you to get in. Keep it unlocked, all right? Remember, just quietly, make your way to the basement and stay there. Lock the door." Jeff unlocked the gates to the estate, and I began walking up to the mansion. The noise of Jeff locking up the gate with multiple chains and padlocks made me take one last look back at him, to which he just gave me a thumbs up. The mansion was a wreck. There wasn't even a doorknob to turn to enter the place. It had fallen off long ago. The place looked like it had been ransacked long ago. I moved through the entrance hallway to see graffiti covered the walls, and syringes were littered around the floors. Some of the more untouched rooms I passed were caked in dust. Finally, I reached what had to be the door to the basement. It led me down some stairs. The basement actually seemed somewhat cozy, like someone had actually been living here. A decent bed, a TV, and one of those old antique phones with a rotary dial that take ages to call a number with. There was even an old PlayStation 1 console and a few games. I pulled out Jeff's list of rules, unfolding it. He had crudely written them down with a blue pen. Stay in the basement and keep the door locked. Only leave the basement from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. Each night, turn all the lights off. Unlock all the entrance doors. Turn off the living room TV if it's on, otherwise turn it on. If you see anyone else in the mansion, hide. Never talk to them, never let them find you. Try to keep the lights off and keep the volume down. You don't want to attract any attention. Help yourself to anything in the fridge. Make friends with the dog. Give it a treat each time you see him. Answer the basement phone when it rings, but never say anything. Hang up if the call goes on longer than a minute. Never leave the house. The exceptions being Friday, 3 a.m. I'll be waiting for you by the gates. I checked my phone, 3:45 a.m. I went up the stairs to the basement door, then closed and locked it. Heading back down the stairs, I resolved to play some PlayStation games, assuming that Jeff left them behind to keep me from losing my mind to boredom. Monday, 7:11 a.m. I was beginning to unwind and unpack my bags when I heard the faintest noises come from above me. They sounded like muffled talking, and I couldn't make out what they were saying. I wondered if what I was doing was even legal. Do these people know Jeff? Is Jeff a squatter and I just took his place so that I can take the blame when these people inevitably come down to the basement? I wondered who they were. The original owners of the house? Drug addicts? The police? I thought it would be best just to keep quiet and get some rest. I had brought some earplugs for just such an occasion. I checked my phone as I lay down in bed. No service and no Wi-Fi. Monday, 5:13 p.m. I awoke to a large banging against the basement door. Someone was knocking on it with a closed fist or a hammer, I don't know. I kept quiet until it passed. I felt peckish but hadn't packed any food with me. I reread the list a few times over, trying not to forget anything. I thought about how I hadn't seen a dog and wondered where the hell the fridge was meant to be, because it certainly wasn't in the basement. I kept on playing on the PlayStation for a few hours to distract myself from my hunger and the muffled voices upstairs, deciding to wait until 1 a.m. to search the house for food. Tuesday, 1 a.m. I stared at my phone for a few minutes until it was finally 1 a.m. The voices stopped long ago. I guess they left or fell asleep. I half expected to see someone waiting for me as I unlocked the basement door. I was damn creaky as I slowly pushed the door open. I was very much aware that Jeff knew there would be other people here, and for whatever reason he wanted me to do my chores without ever alerting my presence to them. I had so many questions, but I still had student loans to pay off, remember? I could hardly believe what I saw. The house that was last night in such a terrible state was fully repaired and looked amazing, even in the darkness. I had to pinch my arm to convince myself I wasn't dreaming. I actually went back into the basement, carefully remembering to lock the door, and spent a while letting my mind race about what the fuck was going on. Tuesday, 1:20 a.m. I finally mustered the courage to unlock the basement door a second time and open the door. The mansion was still in amazing condition. It looked very lived in. I had wondered if it was time travel, a portal to another dimension, or an elaborate prank. Maybe Jeff was some kind of Hagrid, and this is how he likes to introduce magic to people. I made my way through the mansion, quietly exploring it. It didn't take long for me to find the kitchen and steal some cake from the fridge, remembering Rule 5, help yourself to anything in the fridge. I also made myself a few sandwiches and brought them back into the basement for tomorrow. I'll admit, I also grabbed a sharp kitchen knife and carried it around the halls with me. Some of the lights in some rooms were on, so I turned them off. I found entrance doors, the front door, the door in the west wing, and the door in the south wing that led to a massive pool. I sort of wanted to explore the whole property and have some time outside the creepy house, but Rule 8 held me at bay. Never leave the house. I found what had to be the living room. The TV was on, but only showing static and making static noises. I turned it off. I felt something touch the back of my heels as I did this and almost yelped aloud. It was the dog, a skinny old Jack Russell Terrier, wagging its tail. Its eyes were such a dark shade of brown. In this darkness, I couldn't even make eye contact with it. Its collar tag read, Chester. I led Chester to the kitchen and gave him a small slice of ham from the fridge. Tuesday, 3:50 a.m. By this time, I had explored all of the rooms that didn't have closed doors. Chester followed me the whole time, no doubt hoping for more treats. I ended up just sitting in the living room petting him for a good hour, making sure to keep track of the time. After cleaning my teeth, I finally made my way to the basement door. Shit. I forgot to lock it. I didn't even close the damn door. I felt like an idiot. But in my own defense, I was a little distracted by the whole entered a new dimension / discovered magic thing. I figured it wasn't a big deal, as nothing had gone wrong that night. I pet Chester goodbye and went into the basement, remembering to lock the door behind me this time. I went down the stairs dreading that some horrible monster or ghost would be waiting for me at the bottom, but all was fine, thank God. I put some earplugs in and checked my phone again. Still no service. And still no damn Wi-Fi. I guess they don't have any Wi-Fi even in this new mansion. Tuesday, 3 p.m. I woke up from some dumb nightmare to the antique phone ringing, the noise overpowering my earplugs. I remembered to answer the phone but say nothing. But to be honest, if I heard Jeff's voice, I would have asked him what the hell this place is. I heard the voice of a middle-aged man. Hello? A long pause. Hello? Anyone there? Another long pause. Click. I let out a sigh of relief, followed by a minor metaphorical heart attack as large knocks started hammering against the basement door. Something is trying to get in. Wednesday, 1 a.m. I grabbed my knife and the house key and left the basement, remembering to lock it behind me this time. The house still looked really, really good. Many of the lights were turned on, illuminating its brilliance. Try to keep the lights off and keep the volume down. You don't want to attract any attention. I started my chores by turning off all of the lights that I could. There was one room with a closed door that I could see light shining out of. I was conflicted, but opted to keep the door shut. The last light switch I turned off scared the hell out of me. "Honey, is that you?" came from a corner in the darkness. It was a man's voice, the same man from the phone. I didn't say a word, just slowly backed out of the room. A moment later, I heard the light switch turn back on, and the man left the room, turning on all light switches in his path. I didn't even bother with the rest of the jobs that night. I headed straight for the basement. I heard a window smashing on the second floor, followed by a blood-curdling scream from a woman like someone was being murdered. A woman screaming, pleading frantically for help. I ran for the basement, locking it behind me. Wednesday, 3:45 a.m. At this point, I was freaking out. I knew I had to do the chores. They were so damn specific, I felt like I'd be killed for not following them. But those people, those ghosts, they were out there. The house had been mostly quiet for an hour, but I heard someone walking around heavily upstairs. The phone rang. It was Jeff, a drunk Jeff. "Mate, is that you?" "It's Jeff." A pause. I wanted to scream at the man, but I knew I shouldn't say anything to the phone. "Hello, Cindy, is that you? Are your parents there?" Another pause. "Look, just tell your dad I need a lift. My damn car's broken down and my shift starts in an hour. I gotta go." Click. I sat down on the bed, defeated. I knew I was going to make it out of here alive, though. Whatever weird reality-bending shit was going on, I was going to make it. My knife held tightly in one hand, the key in the other. I unlocked the basement door, locked it behind me, then started turning off all the lights. Streaks of blood covered the floors, like someone had dragged a body around the house. I never followed the blood as it led into darkness. I just turned off what lights I could, turned on the living room TV, unlocked the doors, and then made it back to the basement with only seconds to spare. I locked the door behind me, obsessively turning the doorknob again and again to make sure I had definitely locked it. I didn't get any sleep that day. Thursday, 1 a.m. With what little battery my otherwise useless phone had, I woke up from an alarm I set for 1 a.m. I eventually got so tired around midnight that I knew I had to have a nap for the nightly chores to come. I was also starving at this point. I hadn't eaten anything since Tuesday afternoon, those sandwiches I took back with me. I did all my jobs, practically ransacked the fridge too. The blood streaks from last night were gone, and you better believe I held that knife tightly in my hand the whole time, my little pathetic protection against whatever otherworldly horrors were going on. A new room was open tonight, the light left on. I was shocked to see someone in the bed there. It was a girl's room, pink walls, unicorns, and princess decorations. All the stereotypes. Big letters painted onto the wall spelt CINDY. I figured this was the girl Jeff thought he was talking to last night. The slightest noise behind me and I spun around, seeing Chester looking up at me wagging his tail. I reached into my pockets, pulling out a sausage I had for just this occasion. I kneeled down and gave it to him, trying not to wake the girl. In the light, I saw Chester's true eyes for the first time. They were fully black, devoid of color. Even the sclera, the white part of an eye beyond the pupil, was fully black. "Daddy?" In a split second, I simultaneously leap up from my knees in fright and began running while looking back at the girl. I only saw it for a second before I was out of the room, but the girl's eyes were fully black like Chester's. Ear-piercing screams came from her room. I ran like hell down the hallway. A light came on in front of me. and I darted off to the side in another room. A man, the father I'd already heard from, came running down the hallway, past the room I was hiding in, and into Cindy's. Cindy was screaming and sobbing uncontrollably. All I heard from the father were soft words of comfort. I snuck my way towards the basement, locking the basement door as always. Thursday, 6 p.m. I got some much-needed rest. Thank God for Jeff's PlayStation, because I was desperate for anything to take my mind off the situation I was in. I took a break to listen to the loud knocking on the basement door. This time I slowly crept up to the basement door and pressed my ear to the door when the knocking ended. It was the father, mumbling and grumbling about something I couldn't quite make out. "Hello?" he said through the door. I froze and my heart stood still. It was like he knew I was on the other side of the door. I didn't say a word, and a moment later, I heard him walk away. Friday, 12:50 a.m. I heard footsteps above me. I had never heard footsteps this late before, so I opted to do my chores later, in case any one of those things were roaming around. Friday, 1:10 a.m. Screaming. That blood-curdling woman screaming from upstairs. This time muffled due to me being in the basement, but no less horrifying. The phone rang. I hesitated, but answered. It was the woman, pleading for her life, begging for help. She kept giving the address of the mansion. I didn't even hold the phone to my ear. I laid it down and stood in the corner of the basement with my fingers in my ears, then after a minute came back to hang up on her. Friday, 2:40 a.m. Jeff said in his list of rules that he'd be waiting for me by the gates at 3 a.m., so I guess I could finally leave this messed up place. I didn't bother packing my bags. I didn't want anything slowing me down. I left the basement, locking it for the final time. The floors were streaked with blood again. I did my chores and didn't come across any trouble. The house was dead silent. Chester appeared, worryingly wagging his tail. I gave him a treat. It seemed to cheer him up. That dog is always hungry. You'd think nobody feeds him. I left through the entrance door. It was a misty night again. I followed the road to the gate, with Jeff waiting there for me. How'd it go? I didn't say anything to him, folding my arms both from the cold night air and extreme uncomfortableness. Jeff unlocked the gate and handed me a suitcase full of cash. $14,000, he told me. As he turned to leave, I couldn't help but ask, Jeff, what the hell is this place? Jeff paused for a moment. The house of the dead. The house of my old friend. He murdered his wife and daughter here, and all of their souls have haunted this place since. I don't get it. Why do you need someone to do all this stuff? The less you know, the better. Your single-year contract starts on Monday, if you'll take it. Message me over the weekend, all right? I nodded. Jeff got in his car. I asked one final question before he drove off. Jeff, did you try to call me, or was that the ghosts? Jeff just looked at me quizzically, then frowned and shook his head no. Monday, 3 a.m. I did my research on the place. Who the hell wouldn't? I was about to live in the damn place for a year alone, with my only company being an undead ghost dog. The father and Jeff were co-founders of a wealthy business involved in importing and exporting. I know the official story, but if I don't survive this next year of my life, I want to put my suspicions out there. Jeff murdered that family. He went mad because they were haunted him for it. Eventually, Jeff figured out to end the haunting from ghosts. You must haunt them first. I am a distraction. That is my purpose. Turn the lights off when they should be on. Distract the ghosts. Make them forget that they're dead and that the man who took everything from them is still out there. I should care, but the money is good. I inherited a house people think is haunted. The drive to the New England coast was like most road trips, exhausting but fascinating. An endless sea of fast food restaurants, hotels of varying quality, and roadside tourist traps. But the best part was taking it with Jade, my longtime girlfriend and new wife. Our ceremony was about as low-key as you can get, as we dressed up slightly and got married at a courthouse with just a few family members and close friends in attendance. Afterwards, we ate dinner at the Cheesecake Factory. Naturally, we indulged in the celebration cheesecake in lieu of a wedding cake. And I don't mean we each got a slice to go. No, we bought an entire cheesecake. took it home, and ate a piece every night while watching TV. There was no destination wedding, no massive banquet hall, no DJ, no awkward best man or maid of honor speeches, no day-long photo sessions with bridesmaids and groomsmen, no dress or tux rental, no bridal registry, and no stress. My favorite part? The fact that she was the one who suggested it. "I hate all that bridezilla nonsense," Jade said every time she had to be in a friend's wedding. Believe me, I'm happy for her, but a wedding is a wedding, no matter what the price tag is. But the last straw happened in the lead up to her friend Taylor's wedding. After some fitting, she came home and was irate. I've officially had it with anyone planning a wedding. No matter what, someone turns into a wannabe general acting like they're planning an invasion. Roosevelt and Churchill probably argued less about D-Day than Taylor, the groom, and her parents argued over seating arrangements. And the clothes arguments. I swear, renting an overpriced dress is worse than renting bowling shoes. At least with bowling shoes, they're reasonably priced. You're almost guaranteed to have fun while wearing them, and the trouble you can get into while wearing them is limited. I shudder to think about what certain tuxes or dresses go through at weddings or other formal occasions. I laughed. That was the moment I knew she was the right one for me. I always told myself that if I was ever going to get married, I would do it once, and do it right. Quite frankly, I would be happy with getting married in sweatpants and eating Chinese takeout, so long as it was with the right person. So when we got engaged and someone asked us if we were busy planning, the answer was always a gleeful, nope. The reaction never failed to elicit an amusing reaction. To be honest, I think most people never thought we'd actually follow through with our plans. I can't tell you how many people looked at me with pure envy. Because of the lack of a wedding ceremony, we saved a ton of money and decided to put it towards something the two of us would enjoy. But the next question we had to ask ourselves was, what does a couple who has an unconventional wedding do for a honeymoon? Eventually, Jade and I planned a road trip where we toured across the country and explored creepy destinations. Although for the first few days we did yield to tradition, writing "Just Married" on the back of my SUV in red dry erase marker. It earned us plenty of honks and waves along the way. As soon as we got on the highway and started playing some classic rock, I had never felt so alive before. The two of us barreling down the open road together towards the future. That's what marriage is really about. But about halfway through the trip, we got a call from a lawyer representing the estate of my Uncle Carlton. A rich eccentric, he had lived as a hermit for almost 20 years before he died, and for some reason, I had been left ownership of White Pine, his home on the ocean. We were both surprised, but considering people leave stuff to their pets these days, it wasn't the craziest thing ever. But that meant I did have to sign some papers to formalize the process. So we made plans to meet the lawyer and see the house on the return journey home. As the news began to sink in, so did the excitement. I couldn't believe my luck. Possibilities began to race through my head. Should I sell the land and make a fortune off it, or keep it and live in some mansion with my new wife for a while? It was like the whole world had changed in the blink of an eye. The fact that a single announcement can turn everything upside down, for good or bad, is uncanny. As we arrived to see the house, I couldn't remember the last time I had been this excited. The posh neighborhood only added to the surrealness of it all. But when we arrived, I wasn't sure what to think. Instead of some grand country estate, White Pine looked like the kind of place local kids told stories about. The kind that usually ended with them daring each other to get close or go inside. The house was the same kind of white frame, dark shutter beach house as the rest of the area, but it needed a new paint job, and the lawn was in disarray, not like the rest of the impeccably cut lawns with perfect hedges and catalog-worthy flower gardens we had seen for miles. Jade and I didn't say anything to each other at first. We just sat there, staring straight ahead at the house and the property before I parked in front of the 3-car garage and stepped out into the humid afternoon air. As I did, I heard the shrill drone of a mosquito as it flew past my ear. The realtor and probate attorney were already outside waiting for us. The realtor was a slender blonde woman in a white pantsuit. With her well-practiced smile, she was the kind of woman who was probably voted homecoming queen in high school. The lawyer, with his closely cropped silver hair, wore a navy blue business suit and a polite but official expression. "Spencer?" The realtor reached us first. Yes. Cindy Hutton, pleased to meet you. She shook my hand and the probate attorney stepped forward. And I'm Edward Westfield, attorney at law. Westfield firmly shook my hand before he took some papers out of his briefcase and went over them before I signed. I liked his demeanor, businesslike, thorough, but succinct. No doubt he'd gotten plenty of practice at this over the years. Now that the house is officially yours, he concluded by putting the papers back into his briefcase, Cindy will take you two on a tour so you can decide what to do with it. She did just that, and I was happy to feel quite at home at White Pine. I was also pleasantly surprised to see that the house's interior was in far better shape than the exterior. The house was a little dated, but it worked with the place's nautical-themed decor. But during the last few minutes of the tour, Cindy slipped in a small detail as we were walking back out the front door towards Westfield. The property has quite a long history, as do most of the houses in the area. It used to belong to a prominent local sea captain in the late 1800s. Some locals even love to claim the place is haunted. Wait, haunted? I blurted out. Yes, you know how people can be about that. Any historical home is haunted anymore. If you want to know my professional opinion, Cindy's voice dropped to a whisper. I think most people love to say their house is haunted because it draws in potential buyers. It's not like the old days where an infamous house was a non-seller. These days people snap them up in a heartbeat. You got that right. Jade nodded along. But that's all we have for you. Westfield clapped his hands together in a final gesture as we returned to where he was standing. If there's anything you need from me, here's my card. While he produced one from his jacket pocket, Cindy fished one out of her purse, and they both handed them to me in turn. My best wishes to you both. He politely nodded to us and walked to his silver Lexus. Good luck, you two, no matter what you decide, and have a safe trip home. Cindy eagerly shook my hand farewell and gave Jade a quick hug before she too turned and walked to her car, a white BMW. With that, Jade and I were alone with the sounds of crickets, seagulls, and the gentle rocking of waves. Well, what do you think? Do you like it? I do, she nodded. A lot. In spite of its age? No, because of it, she smiled. What other people call baggage or history, I call character. I'm sick of all the cookie-cutter suburban McMansions I can't stop seeing everywhere. They're so generic and boring. Does this place have its problems? Sure, but it's honest about it. Besides, look at this place, Spencer. The view alone is priceless. I couldn't argue with that. With the white picket fence, stunning views of the deep blue ocean, the waves gently lapping on the beach in the backyard, and the cozy nautical theme of the house, it truly was priceless. In an instant, I imagined clam bakes out on the back deck and sipping iced teas on the screened-in front porch on the 4th of July weekend, while the sound of fireworks boomed over the water. The possibilities were endless, and the feeling was intoxicating. We spent some basic money having the essentials renovated, but I felt no need to splurge on fancy furniture or anything. The process was so much fun for the both of us. Countless afternoons exploring the new house and finding all the little nooks and idiosyncrasies that make each house unique. I didn't feel like the place was haunted at all, but I did feel on a few occasions that I wasn't alone when it turned out no one was there. But I chalked it up to the whole new house thing, and the place was very old, and they always feel lived in. Like Jade said herself, new mass-produced houses are empty in a lot of ways. One night, about a month after I officially signed the papers, we had some guests over when Jade's family came down in lieu of a housewarming party. Jade was whipping up some potato salad with her brother, and I was warming up the grill in the back with Pete, her dad, when we suddenly heard screaming in the house. The two of us sprinted inside and found ourselves in the sitting room where Erin, Jade's 24-year-old niece, was screaming incoherently. We all just stood there while Lily, Jade's mother, tried to calm her down. After she babbled on for about a minute, Erin finally managed to explain what happened. I was watching The Real Housewives on my iPad when something made it go across the room and crash against the wall. It was like someone ripped it right out of my hands. I had no idea if that was what really happened, but it was clear Erin was seriously freaked out by something. While Jade and her mom tried to get her to take a breath, Pete and I slowly left the room, unsure of what to do with ourselves. As we walked back outdoors, I heard Pete mutter to me, "Thank God we don't have to listen to that absurd show anymore." If I had to hear one more second of that nonsense, I would have thrown it at the wall myself. "I don't blame you, Pete. Now how about we fire up that grill?" He nodded approvingly. "Good man." The rest of the cookout passed without incident, but Aaron was quiet for the rest of the evening. Nothing remotely like that happened again until 3 weeks later, when my brother Nate and his girlfriend Alyssa came to spend the night at the house. We had a great dinner at a local bistro and came back after midnight. Jade and I headed to bed soon after, and I was almost asleep when we heard some raised voices coming from the guest bedroom. But raised voices quickly turned into full-fledged yelling and a loud crash that was followed by the sound of Alyssa screaming. I bolted out of bed, ran out of our bedroom, and frantically knocked on the guest room door. Nate and Alyssa bolted out of the room and ran into the hallway, nearly colliding with me as they did. We were just watching one of those ridiculous dating shows to doze off to when we heard the TV switch off. I thought it was just a fluke, so I switched it back on, but the minute I laid back down, it switched off again. So then I yelled at the TV, switched it back on, and sat there. But instead of switching off again, one of those massive bookends flew across the room, slammed into the TV, and shattered it. "And I swear," Alyssa spoke up, "I saw the shape of a person take it off the shelf and hurl it towards the screen, a big silhouette." I stood there, stunned into silence. "I hope you won't be offended if we spend the night at a hotel," Nate said. Nate's expression was practically begging me to say no, which I did. Then he and Alyssa wasted no time at all in grabbing their stuff and leaving the house as quickly as possible. I'd never seen him move so fast in my life. Once they left, Jade and I were alone and speechless, but eventually we went back to bed. "Do you believe that really happened?" She turned to face me once we were both settled back under the covers. "Honestly, I have no reason to doubt it did, but on the other hand, it's weird." Weird is right. Do you remember what they said about this house supposedly being haunted? Yeah, and I've been thinking about what happened with your niece. But we've been in this house for a while, and nothing like that's happened since. We've turned on the TV 1,000 times and never had anything odd happen. I know. Oh well, I guess I can't exactly blame someone for not wanting to watch one of those terrible reality dating shows, although I use the term reality loosely. You got that right. Good night. Good night. Nothing else odd happened that night, and we both slept fine. A few days later, it was raining out, so the two of us were having a quiet movie night at home. After I attempted to start a fire in the massive stone fireplace, I flipped through the movie channels in search of something to watch, and I noticed that 50 Shades of Grey was on. "I dare you to leave that on." I looked up and saw Jade smirking at me. "Why?" "I know people who went to see it in the movie theater and left after half an hour. People who've never walked out of a movie in their life." "Half an hour? That's pretty impressive." "I know. Let's see if we can outlast them." I put the remote down, settled down on the sofa, and watched as the movie started. "This movie is so bad," Jade shook her head when we were barely 5 minutes in. "It's stunning, really. I can't even imagine how they filmed this with a straight face, and these are all the best takes. Imagine what didn't make it into the movie." "I know, but that happens with a lot of movies." "Yeah, but this is next level." But before I could say another word, the screen abruptly switched off. Jade looked at me, but I shrugged at her. I reached down to grab the remote, but she suddenly grabbed my arm. "Wait a minute. I've noticed a pattern." Then she looked around expectantly at the sitting room. "Do you have a recommendation?" After only a few seconds, the TV switched back on, and the channels began to flip past until they stopped abruptly on another movie. My jaw hit the floor when I saw the movie was The Exorcist. I was too stunned to talk, but Jade was laughing and couldn't stop. "I thought you had a sense of humor." "It is a masterpiece, but do you really want us to watch The Exorcist?" she eventually managed to ask. There was no answer, But after a few moments, the channel changed, and another movie came on screen. It took me a moment to recognize it, but there was no mistaking Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard. Good choice. Thanks for letting us know it's on. She relaxed against the couch and looked at me nonchalantly. I shrugged and did the same. It's good to have another person with good tastes in movies and TV in the house, I said. You're welcome to voice your opinion if someone tries to make us watch something awful again, but please try not to destroy the TV if you can avoid it. We both waited for some sign of a reaction, which didn't come. But just as I was about to focus back on the movie, my sad attempt at a fire, which had been smoldering weakly in the fireplace, suddenly sprung to life and crackled merrily in the grate. I moved into a haunted house for all the wrong reasons. The thought of moving into a haunted house was exciting for me. I didn't really believe in the paranormal, but I also didn't not believe in it, if that makes any sense. I'm in my mid-30s, single, and even though I always imagined one day settling down with a wife and dog and white picket fence, none of that seemed to be happening. I'm not the most handsome guy, and combine that with being a little socially awkward, I realized it was more realistic to get the house first than a partner. It's not a big place either. It's 1,200 square feet with a tiny backyard, and the neighbors are so close, I can almost reach out and touch their house without leaving my yard. But it was mine. It was a longhouse, a shotgun-style house, I think they're called. The previous owners had bought it with the intention of flipping it. They had only done half the work, stopping midway through renovations and selling at a loss. It was the fault of the ghosts, apparently. The outside was beautiful. The siding was all new, a dark hunter green with bright yellow door that felt both cheerful and welcoming. The landscaping was simple, but well done. Once you got into the house, you could see where the renovations stopped. Some walls were painted, and some were not. The kitchen was untouched and didn't look like it had been updated since the 70s. But the one bathroom and master bedroom had been completely redone and looked great. It was all I needed. I was certain that I could update the kitchen later if I wanted to. If the stove and fridge worked, I didn't really care what it looked like. I was the first of my siblings to purchase a house, and my mom was thrilled at first when I told her. When she first came to visit, she seemed less than impressed. Her face dropped as she walked into the home for the first time. "Oh, James, this place is only half done, and it's so small," she sighed as she looked around my tiny home. My mood dropped when she said that, though I tried to not let it show. "It's all I need, Mom. I'm just a single guy. I don't even have a dog yet. Besides, this is all I could afford. Houses are expensive around here," I explained. My mom shook her head and kept frowning. "But honey, if you get married, there won't be enough room for both of you and your children," she said sadly. After Mom left that day, I tried to raise my spirits. My mom was always like that, and I should have prepared myself emotionally before she came over. I ended up ordering a pizza and settling down for some gaming with my friends. Most of my friends live in other states and even other countries, but we're all gamers, so we have that to connect us. I had been showing them all pictures and videos of my home throughout the day, and at least they were impressed. "Dang, dude, you're like an official adult now," my friend Yuri chirped over the headset. My mood lifted with that. At least my friends could appreciate my new place. "Thanks, man. Though I hate to tell you I've been an adult since I was 18. I snapped back. On the screen I could see him shrug. "If you say so, man. I know I didn't think of you as an adult till now." He grinned at me. I laughed. On the monitor I could see my other friends rolling their eyes at Yuri, or they were just focusing on the game. There were 6 of us total. Me, Yuri, Robert, Cheryl, Sadie, and Travis. A pretty full game night. A few of my friends were married or had kids, so it was rare that they could have enough time to join a game session. I was finally settling into the game in between bites of my dinner when my friend Cheryl caught my attention through the headset. "Hey James, is there anyone with you right now?" she asked. "Yeah, all of you guys," I said as I sipped my beer. "No, I mean in the house with you right now." "Didn't you say your mom left? I just saw someone walk past your doorway." She sounded concerned. I glanced down at her face on the monitor. She was staring intently at me with her controller down by her side. I turned in my chair and looked behind me. There was nothing in the hallway, and my mom had been gone for hours, and I absolutely lived alone. Turning back around, I shrugged. Did you see a shadow or something, Cheryl? There's no one here except for me, I tried to reassure her. Could you just go check? I swear to you that someone just walked past your doorway. She sounded worried. Mentally, I rolled my eyes, but I smiled at her and nodded. Okay, I'll just go check. Maybe it's the ghosts after all, I said, trying to lighten the mood. Or maybe it's just a good old-fashioned burglar coming to steal your old Atari system and moldy pizza boxes. Robert piped in over the headset. Robert, I'm being serious right now. I know someone walked by the door, Cheryl hissed at him. Do you need us to have 911 on standby? Sadie asked. You're all the way in Kansas City, Sadie. I don't think they'll reach me in time. I laughed. Just yell if you need us. We'll come running. Travis joined in. I loved my friends. I really did. But if someone was really in the house and I was about to be murdered, they'd probably regret those jokes later. I stood up and poked my head into the hallway. Nothing. I walked to the master bedroom. Also, nothing. Same for the kitchen and bathroom and living room. Say what you want about small houses, but there is absolutely no place for a serial killer or burglar to hide in one. When I came back into the second bedroom, all my friends were waiting for an update. I shrugged, before sitting down and putting the headset back on. There's nothing there. Maybe the hallway lights or something caused a weird shadow. But I'm all alone in here, I told everyone. Cheryl still didn't look convinced, but everyone else accepted it. We kept gaming, and everyone with kids or spouses started signing off as the hours passed, till it was just me and Yuri gaming well past midnight. But as 1 a.m. got closer, even he was ready to call it a night. He lived on the East Coast, so it was even later in the evening for him. I'll talk at you later. The Sandman is finally calling me to bed. He yawned over the headset. Same here. It was a good time. The best way to break in a new house is for a good gaming session, I yawned back. He laughed and signed off, and I stood up with a groan. I was stiff from all the sitting. At least tomorrow was Saturday, so I could sleep in and then get busy with putting everything away. This would be my first full night in my new home. I was excited, but also felt a little nervous in a new place. The creaks and groans of the new house weren't familiar yet. I hadn't done enough to the place to make it feel like home. It almost felt like I was staying at an Airbnb instead of something I'd bought and paid for. My bed was set up, but I hadn't put the sheets on it yet, and I wasn't going to either. No one was going to judge me expect the ghosts if there were any. I spread out a blanket to cover the bare mattress and pulled a knitted blanket on top of me. This would be just fine till morning. I had my phone in bed with me, and even though I was exhausted, I couldn't resist some mindless scrolling till sleep finally took me. I felt my eyes closing. It was a relaxing feeling, that need for sleep pulling you down till you couldn't ignore it anymore. As I set my phone down, a flash of movement by the doorway caught my eye. It was low to the ground and dark. My heart started pounding as the small burst of adrenaline hit my system. I know I was half asleep, but it had looked like hair, as if someone was peeking at me from the doorway with their head on the ground and then suddenly jerked out of sight. I pushed myself off the bed and cautiously peered out into the hallway. I had my phone in hand, rearing it back as if I would use it to bludgeon someone. A stupid idea. It wouldn't be a good weapon, plus I'd break my phone when I needed it the most. Reaching around the door frame, I flicked on the hallway light. There was nothing. I stepped out into the hallway and closed the bedroom door behind me. I didn't want anything sneaking into the bedroom with my back turned, if anything was there. The second bedroom I used as my game room was closed, and I knew nothing was in there. I would have heard the door opening and closing. The doors and windows were locked. Nothing in the kitchen or living room. The bathroom was also clear. I felt myself relax as I realized I was alone, but I still felt like I saw something. Maybe it was a rat, though a rodent of that size running around my house, possibly chewing through cables in my electronics, didn't make me feel any better. When I went back to bed, I closed the door behind me and locked it. Probably not necessary, but it made me feel better. At the very least, it would be a deterrent to rats. I was asleep as soon as I hit the bed. When I got up the next morning, I found out I had slept in more than I intended. Not that it mattered, I had the whole day to do whatever I wanted. A nice breakfast and 2 cups of coffee later, I was ready to get started. Luckily, I didn't have much in the way of possessions. I had an extensive game collection and memorabilia, but beyond that, my home was a bachelor pad. It made setting everything up easy, though. By 5 p.m. that day, I felt satisfied with everything. All I had to do now was get used to my new home. I sat on the couch and turned on the TV. After close to an hour of YouTube, I realized I was bored and restless. Now was as good a time as any to get out and explore the neighborhood. I locked up the house behind and picked a random direction to walk in. It was a good-sized neighborhood. All the houses were older and smaller than you'd see in a normal suburb. Some looked like they hadn't been updated in decades and looked lived in and loved. Others had new siding and had an air of modernity that made me think they had been bought and flipped like my house had. The walk was therapeutic. I should make this a daily habit, I thought to myself. Getting out of the house, away from the electronics, was a good way to detox. "Hello!" A small, quiet voice spoke from beside me, and I jumped. I looked around, my eyes finally settling on an old woman sitting on a metal folding chair in her front yard. She looked up at me, smiling and offering a slight wave. Beside her, an old dog of indeterminate breed slept beside her in the sun. "Hello!" she said again, slightly louder, as if she was afraid I hadn't heard her the first time. "Hello," I said back, perhaps with a little too much enthusiasm. She had startled me, but I felt I should still be polite. "You just moved in, didn't you? To that greenhouse down the street? It used to be white," she said matter-of-factly. "Uh-huh," I nodded back at her. I felt my mood drop. I like old ladies as much as the next person, but that didn't mean I wanted to sit and talk to her. Old ladies tended to ramble. She nodded sagely while reaching down and giving her dog a gentle pat. It didn't wake, but it stirred in his sleep. "You be careful in that house. It's had a lot of owners over the years. Not many people stay for long. There was a lady murdered in it, in the 70s. It doesn't seem that long to me, but I bet you weren't even born yet," she chuckled. "Uh-huh," I said non-committedly, slowly edging away from her. I knew it. She was a rambling old lady, and I was about to get sucked into a long conversation I didn't ask for. I already knew the place was haunted. Supposedly it was anyway. I knew her, the lady who was murdered. My husband and I moved into this house when we were in our 30s. It was our dream house. I remember Nancy. She was a sweet girl. Her husband was a monster, though, but back then you never could intervene with those things. "It wasn't your place," she said sadly. "Uh-huh," I said again, though I stopped backing away. I could spare a few minutes if she was going to give me the gory backstory to the house I lived in. "He killed her one night, bashed her head in. He was jealous, said she was trying to sneak out of the house, trying to leave him. Though if that was true, I wouldn't blame her." The old woman sniffed and wiped her nose. I stood there, waiting for her to keep going, but she seemed to have been lost in thought. Either that, or she was having a senior moment. I cleared my throat, trying to get her attention. "Sorry, dear. I was lost in my memories. I'm Deborah, by the way. Lovely to meet you. You should keep on with your walk. Don't mind me. I tend to ramble sometimes." She waved her hand as if dismissing me. I smiled at her and waved as I walked away, though I kept glancing back at Deborah. She seemed happy, just sitting there in her chair in the front yard. I wondered if she talked to everyone who walked by. If she did, I'd have to make sure not to walk past her house again. The rest of my walk was uneventful. I even took the time to stop at the local coffee shop and had an iced tea before walking back home. Except for the weird encounter with the old lady, it had been a pleasant time. It was getting dark by the time I made it back home. I had stayed out longer than I intended, and I had also gotten lost. Several times. If I was going to take daily walks, I would have to get better at finding my way home. Walking in the house, it was dark, and I hesitated at the entrance. I could have sworn I left the table side lamp on at least. I hate walking into a dark house, so I always leave at least one light on, but it was off. I shrugged. Maybe I was misremembering. There wasn't much to do for the evening. It was just a matter of making myself some dinner and either watching a movie or playing a video game. I decided on leftovers and some good old solo gaming time. I had plenty of games I had been meaning to start. I was warming up the pizza in the microwave with my back to the living room when the TV suddenly switched on. It wasn't loud, but the sudden noise was enough to make me gasp and whirl around. It was switched on to the local news channel. I stared at it for a few seconds before going over to turn it off. Then I turned it back on and selected Netflix. A movie sounded better with dinner anyway. I did check the cables on the back of the TV to see if anything had come loose, and the batteries were good in the remote and it hadn't fallen off the table, which might have explained why it switched on. When I sat down to eat my dinner, I was a little unsettled. The thought of ghosts was getting to me, and I didn't even really believe in the supernatural. Maybe I need to get my house tested for radon. The evening passed quickly enough. No one else was able to game that night, and I just mindlessly watched Netflix and messed around on my phone till it was midnight again. Another exciting evening in my new home in the bag. That night, I jolted awake. I had been fast asleep. I hadn't even remembered falling asleep. My phone was in my hand, still playing a relaxing rain sounds playlist from Spotify. I lay there for a few minutes trying to understand what woke me up. That's when I heard it. A soft but unmistakable sound of something being dragged down the hallway. I sat upright and stared at the bedroom door. I had closed and locked it again, safety against any rats that might try to sneak in while I was unconscious. The sound was still there, steady and obvious as it slowly made its way down the length of the hallway and into the living room. There was no way I could blame this on a dream, and if it was a rat, it was the size of a dog, in which case I was terrified to find out what it was dragging down the length of my house. My heart was pounding with the adrenaline that was being pumped into it. I sat there, minutes passing, as I listened to whatever it was drag itself all over my house. I didn't jump up to investigate like I did yesterday. This time I was genuinely afraid. And just as suddenly as the sound started, it stopped. And still I sat there, listening to the silence. In some ways it was worse, because now I had no idea where the hell this thing was. Another minute passed before I worked up the courage to go to the door, open it and peer into the hallway. It was empty. I did another quick check of the house, and it was all empty. Doors and windows all locked tight. Going back to bed was hard. I thought about staying up watching TV, but quickly dismissed the idea. I'd rather be safe in my locked bedroom than exposed in the living room. I grabbed my laptop and watched YouTube while sitting in bed. It felt safer, having some kind of noise in the room with me. I did fall asleep, but only when the light of dawn was peeking over the horizon, and I heard birds chirping. I sighed and closed the laptop and passed out. When I woke up again, it was well past noon, and I was starving. I also felt sheepish. In the light of day, the noises I heard last night seemed childish. It had to be rats. I had seen something the previous night, and I needed to do the adult thing and call an exterminator. Walking into the kitchen to make some food, I busied myself with looking up the local exterminators, and I looked up homemade rat traps and natural deterrents. Maybe I should try to get rid of the things on my own before calling in the professionals. The food and coffee helped, though now I had no idea what to do today, except set up some homemade rat traps. I did give my new house a good cleaning, mostly because I wanted to look for any sign of the elusive rodents. There were no droppings, no holes in the walls or ceiling, nothing that would indicate their presence. I started Googling how to test for radon. After all that, I just sat on my sofa and tried to think. Between the stress of moving, getting used to a new place, and all the worry about rodent infestations and ghosts, maybe I was just overwhelmed. "Are there any ghosts in here?" I called out, surprising myself. I really hadn't meant to speak, it just kind of burst out of me. The sound of my own voice startled me. It hung heavy in the air. I hadn't spoken to anyone or even heard my own voice since I spoke to the old woman the other day. I hadn't realized how quiet it was till the silence had been disturbed. "If there are ghosts here, I'm sorry that you died," I stammered. "But if you are here and it's you making those noises, could you please stop? I'd like us to live together in peace. Neither of us can go anywhere. So, we're kind of stuck together, I explained to the probably non-existent ghosts. I know your name is Nancy. I talked to Deborah. She was your neighbor while you were, alive. I stammered again, feeling cringeworthy. If you don't bother me, I won't bother you. We can find a way to live together. I've always been good with roommates, I explained. The house was silent. I sat there for a full minute, my ears straining to hear anything. I wasn't sure what I was even listening for, an actual answer. If I were to hear a disembodied voice, I'd run right out of the house. But there was just silence. I took that as an answer. All right, well, I'm glad we could talk about it, I said to the empty space. I rubbed my eyes with the palms of my hand while I said it, feeling like a complete idiot. But I did feel better, all things considered. The rest of the day and night were quiet and uneventful. The week passed in peace, and the next. I won't lie. I half believed that addressing the ghost helped. The rational side of me just thought the giant rat that lived in my house had finally found a way outside. Either way, the silence at night was heavenly. A month had passed in sweet silence. The only sounds in the house were the ones that I was making. I had gone on more walks, avoided Deborah, and had plenty of time to game with friends when they had the time to do it. I really felt like I was nailing this whole adult living in their own home thing, until the night when the sounds started up again. A crash woke me up. I sat bolt up in bed and stared at the open door. I had stopped closing it and locking it at night a week ago. From the living room, I heard another crash. The sound of obvious footsteps could be heard in the living room. My heart was pounding. This wasn't like last time. This was very obviously a person walking around my home. I reached for my phone and touched the screen. It was dead. A bolt of fear ran through me. Of all times for this thing to be dead, it would happen tonight. I could still hear the footsteps in the living room when I heard a voice beside me. "Don't touch that phone. Leave it right there," a deep male voice said from somewhere beside me. The adrenaline that flooded my system at that moment hit me so hard to made me lightheaded, and I jolted from the bed and ran for the door. Maybe I could make it outside. Someone slammed into me from behind, and I fell to the hallway floor with a loud oomph as the wind was knocked out of me. I lay there stunned as whoever hit me stayed on my back and placed his hand on head, pressing my face into the hardwood. "Stay down! Just stay down," the voice hissed into my ear. His breath smelled foul, and if I could have turned my head, I would have. "There was someone here? I thought you said no one was home," the voice said from the living room. I could hear footsteps approaching, even though I couldn't turn my head. I thought that no one was home. The lights were off and there's no car in the driveway, the voice that was holding me down said. I fought the urge to yell out that they should have checked the garage for a car, but decided that I shouldn't antagonize the burglars. "Go check his room for a wallet," the voice behind me hissed. I managed to turn my head slightly so I could see the man in the living room out of the corner of my eye. He was wearing a dark and filthy hoodie with an equally filthy bandana covering his mouth. His eyes, the only thing visible, were wide with fear. As I lay sputtering on the floor, I saw him snap around and face the living room again. "What was that?" the guy asked, backing further into the hallway. "What do you mean?" "What is it?" the man holding me said. His grip tightened on my hair, and I fought down the urge to yelp. "I hear something! Someone else is in here with us." He shot back, looking from me to his friend, and back again to the living room. That's when I heard it. That same shuffling sound that I hadn't heard for weeks, as if something was being dragged along the floor. This time I heard grunting too, as if someone was exerting themselves with their movements. My heart leapt again. I could hear what it was getting closer and moving into the light. It was a head. Thick and dark hair covered a skull that was only half there. If I looked closer, I could see what looked like brain matter or congealed blood glinting in the light from the caved-in cranium. My stomach heaved at the sight of it. The head moved further into the light, and I could see it was attached to a body. A woman. Her dress, I couldn't tell what color it had been originally, was so caked in blood that it was impossible to tell. The eyes rolled in her sockets as she looked up at the burglars. They were bloodshot, but I could tell that they were brown. I could see the hurt and fear in them, and anger. Her jaw was dislocated, but she still managed a strangled squeal. If she was trying to talk or scream, I couldn't tell, and it honestly didn't matter. The man holding me down finally let me go and jumped back. He let out a low scream, as if there was no breath in his lungs, and he still tried to make a sound. I took the opportunity to push myself towards the hallway's wall, and as far from the apparition and the men as I was able to get, and I looked up. His face was covered too, but his eyes were uncovered and wide with shock. The smaller man who had been in the living room was slowly backing away down the hallway. He was letting out a series of high-pitched screams before he finally turned and bolted, heading straight to the back door. The other burglar followed right behind him. I heard the door slam open, and the glass rattled in its frame as the door hit the side of the house, before swinging back shut with a clang. I breathed a sigh of relief when they left. Then I snapped my head back down the hallway towards the living room to look for the woman. There was no one there. I lay there, my head reeling and trying to catch my breath. I pushed myself up and to my feet. I ran to the back door and made sure it was closed and locked. I slid the deadbolt in place and looked back to the living room. Still nothing. I blinked and rubbed my head. A concussion. It had to be a concussion. That guy slammed into me so hard I had to be disoriented. I called the police in a daze and an ambulance for my head. I waited for them outside on the front porch in a fog, my eyes returning to living room to see if the entity would reappear. There was nothing there, and it was deathly quiet, almost like it was waiting for something. "Thank you," I muttered into the darkness of the house. I felt the energy shift then, as if whatever was in there, whatever had helped me, was satisfied with my thanks. The police came, and the ambulance. My neighbors, who I had never met, came out of their houses to stare and point. A few of them filmed me with their phones. I hoped noting about tonight ended up on YouTube or TikTok. I did end up going to the hospital just to be safe. I had to call my mom and my brother and sister just to let them know what was going on. Mom was hysterical. I almost regretted calling her, but if I didn't, I'd never hear the end of her asking why I didn't call her. I messaged my friends letting them know what had happened. Since none of them lived close, they sent flowers and video chatted. Yuri sent me some DoorDash, which legit made me tear up. Going back home after the hospital was surreal. I hesitated slightly on the doorstep, wondering if I should have stopped at a church for holy water, but the house felt different. It felt lighter, but also expectant, like it was excited to see me. I took a few deep breaths and walked in. It didn't matter if this place was haunted or not. This wasn't the movies where you could just move away at the drop of a hat. I was stuck here. Besides, I still liked my home. I sighed and stretched out my arms in resignation. "I'm home," I said, feeling the tension leave my body. "Welcome home," a tiny voice said from somewhere deep within the house. I chose to ignore it. The scariest haunted house in the world. First off, I'm gonna say something that is likely sacrilege in a place that people gather for horror stories. Fuck Halloween. That's right, you heard me. I used to be like you. I used to like it just fine. Dress up, go to a party, get tossed, and scare the shit out of your friends. It's all just a good time and a night to celebrate the dark and macabre. That is, until one of those nights you realize that it's not just all in good fun, and your brain ends up so fucked from the experience that you scream at the aisle full of plastic skeletons at the drugstore. For me, that experience started with a flyer that my friend Jimmy found under the welcome mat of his family's house. I can still remember him running up to me with that shit-eating grin on his face, like he'd just found the golden ticket. "Kev, check this shit out." He was waving the orange piece of paper as he ran up the steps of my porch. He slapped it into my hands before I could even ask what in the hell he was so excited about. "This looks like it's going to be awesome." I looked at the orange-papered flyer and immediately eye-rolled. I was a cynical kid. I had lost my father to suicide at a young age, and it left me bitter before my time. I scanned the words on the flyer, already hoping I could convince Jimmy this was a stupid idea. I can still remember exactly what was written on it. "Come and see. The scariest haunted house in the world. Thrill as your heart races. Chill. Feel it straight down to your bones. No two experiences will be the same. Guaranteed. All ages admitted. Admission free for all brave enough to attend. 6 p.m. to 12 a.m., only open on All Hallows Eve, located at Patterson Farm off Briar Creek Road. These words, of course, all framed the silhouette of a spooky cartoon haunted house, typical moon in the background, typical bats flying around, and a typical black cat standing out front. I looked at Jimmy and the big dumb grin on his face and wondered how I could be friends with someone so easily entertained. "You're slow, right?" I asked, handing him back the flyer and walking away to sit on my porch swing. "Fuck you, Kevin. I think it sounds sweet." He turned the flyer over in his hands and studied it for likely the 100th time that day. I mean, it says no two experiences will be the same, and it calls itself the scariest haunted house in the world. Every haunted house calls itself the scariest haunted house in the world. Numb nuts. I put my feet up on the porch railing and leaned back, still surprised I could be friends with someone so dumb. It's a marketing thing. It's all bullshit. I mean, honestly. Do you really think an all-ages admitted spook house in the middle of farm country is going to knock your socks off? You never know. It says no two experiences will be the same. Maybe they tailor it to who's walking through. The excitement in his voice was wavering as he attempted to battle against my cynicism. "Gimme a break," I scoffed. "It's free to boot. It's probably going to be a bunch of cheap plastic props some farmer dug out of his garage and a Sounds of the Spooky mixtape." Alyssa already said she is down to go. Finally, Jimmy had said something that piqued my interest. He'd pulled the trump card of Alyssa. She'd started at our high school a few months earlier and was easily one of the best-looking girls I'd ever seen. Jimmy and she actually became somewhat friendly after he helped her get caught up in English/Lit. He never made any kind of move on her because he knew very well I was crushing hard for her. I sat up with a stone face and looked him dead in the eyes. "Really? Her brother is having a party at 9, but she said we should head up super early, beat the crowd, then go to the party." Jimmy held the paper up next to his face and smiled. "Let's have some fun. What do you say, you dick?" Of course, my dumbass said yes, or I wouldn't be here telling you this story now. Alyssa had borrowed her parents' car, and we rode up to Briar Creek Road. We made the turn onto the property of Patterson Farm about 6:15. Jimmy and Alyssa were both excited as we drove up, and I was wondering exactly how they could be so naive. We were 16 at this point, and they were both acting like they were 7. You can imagine my smug satisfaction as we pulled up to what was easily the most empty and pathetic-looking haunted house I'd ever seen in my life. It basically looked as if someone had strung together a bunch of ready-to-build kit sheds into a 5x5 square and painted the whole mess black. There were cheap cobwebs and plastic bats hanging from the outside, and a homemade sign dangling from above the door that read, "Welcome to Patterson Farms, scariest haunted house in the world." The most telling part was the lack of customers. There was no patrons lined up outside to take the trip through, and it being Halloween night, and this being a town without a whole lot to do, it looked as if Jimmy and Alyssa were the only two to get suckered in. "Are you fucking serious with this?" I shouted out, laughing and pointing in the direction of the haunted house. "Look at this place." I clapped Jimmy on the shoulder. "I told you, dude. I fucking told you." "Maybe all the good stuff's inside," said Alyssa. "Some of the haunted houses back in Kentucky looked like shit till you got inside of them." Her voice was uncertain, but she smiled in Jimmy's direction. "Could be." Jimmy was already trying to figure out a way to justify coming to that wreck. I had known him a long time, and I could see him trying to excuse his dumbass choice. Alyssa parked in the dirt lot next to the house, and before I could make my case as to why we should just bail the passenger's door was thrown open by an older man dressed in a black suit and top hat. "The first brave souls of the evening. Welcome, one and all." He stuck his hand in the car looking for Jimmy to give it a shake, and he timidly obliged. The man grasped his hand and practically pulled him from the car, smiling and patting him on the back. Come, and let's get this show on the road." "Someone is a bit excited to see actual humans," I said under my breath in Alyssa's direction. She turned to me with wide eyes and nodded. We got out of the car and joined Jimmy by the side of the old man. "I'm Phineas Patterson, and welcome to the scariest haunted house in the world," the old man shouted as we all lined up in front of him. He gave off the vibe of a sad old grandpa that was doing his best to act excited for the kids. A carnival barker well past his prime. "Come along, brave souls." Mr. Patterson waved his hand for us to follow and started hobbling over towards the haunted house set up on shaky legs. Jimmy and Alyssa followed him with a shrug, I guess figuring they were gonna make the best of it, and I brought up the rear with a less than enthusiastic pace. As we stepped in front of what I guess could be called the front door, I saw all the cheap decorations in their full glory. Fake blood handprints lined the outside walls, strung up orange pumpkin lights, cheap cobwebs, and plastic skeletons covering the outside walls. Next to the door, a boy was sitting in an old rocking chair. He looked like he couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. He was wearing a devil's mask and rocking back and forth, just staring at us. It was the first genuine feeling of the creeps I got that night, as those yellow plastic eyes stared at me. Mr. Patterson walked over next to the boy and patted him on the head. "Never mind my little devil, he's a bit shy around visitors." He flashed a yellow-toothed smile. "All right, who is heading in first?" "First?" Jimmy asked. "Can we not all go in together?" "Oh no, this is a tailor-made experience. One at a time, a few minutes after the first one, the next one goes. It's much scarier alone. Trust me." Again, that yellow, toothy smile. This time, it made me raise an eyebrow. The old man's acting had taken on a much more sinister tone. I had to give him credit, he was putting his all into it. "I'll go." Alyssa stepped forward. I would have expected Jimmy to volunteer first, but his eyes were locked with the kid in the devil mask. He didn't even realize a question had been asked till Alyssa answered it. "Ladies first." "I love it," shouted Mr. Patterson, grabbing the door handle and pulling it open. The open doorway was covered with black sheet from the inside. "I must implore you, young lady, to keep moving. It's best not to linger too long." "See you guys on the other side." Alyssa looked back at us with a smile and disappeared beyond the sheet. Mr. Patterson let the door go, and it slammed shut behind her. It sent a sudden chill up my spine. Who is going to head in next? I looked at Jimmy once again, expecting him to resume his childlike excitement about the whole situation. Instead, he looked at me with eyes seemed full of worry. "You go first, Kev," he whispered to me. "Are you fucking serious?" I said. "Don't tell me you're actually scared of this place." "It's not that." He was quick to defend against my accusation. "I just feel kind of weird all of a sudden. I'll bring up the rear. I just need a minute." "Whatever," I said, stepping forward. "I guess it's me, old man." Mr. Patterson looked at his watch and then at the kid in the devil's mask as if looking for his approval. The devil kid looked at me and nodded, signaling Mr. Patterson to grab the door handle. The old man once again flashed me a toothy grin. "Are you ready, son?" he asked me, his voice low and sinister. "As long as it's still free, Gramps." I squared my shoulders and stood in front of the door. "Admission's free, my brave soul." He chuckled to himself as he pulled the door open. "The real cost is within." I laughed at his cheesy attempt to give me a chill and walked forward through the black sheet and into the room, the sound of the heavy door slamming behind me as I did. The first thing I was struck by was the sickly, sweet plastic smell of the trash bags lining the walls. The only source of light were strings of dimly lit plastic pumpkin lights strung up just as they had been outside. Straight ahead of me, I could see another door framed by plastic tombstones on either side. The sign on the door said, "Start here," and was drawn in red with drops to mimic splattered blood. It was all typical corny fare and very cheaply done. Any mood that had been set by the creepy devil kid and Mr. Patterson's wild-eyed acting was immediately crushed. What a waste of fucking time. I muttered to myself as I pulled the "Start Here" door open with a creak and stepped through. The next room was draped in a thick mist from a fog machine, and I could feel the chill of the air through my jacket. I could hear the ticking of a strobe light as the room quickly alternated between pitch black and fully lit, almost instantly disorienting me. I heard the door slam shut behind me and turned back to see that there was no handle on my side. I heard the whirring of some kind of motor from above me and watched as another sign was slowly lowered on ropes. It was written in that same cheap blood splatter effect and said, "Find the way forward." I could feel the frown droop across my face as I read the words in between flashes of light. This place wasn't scary, but it sure as fuck was doing its best to be annoying. I could see a hallway in front of me and started walking down it, hoping I would run into Alyssa at some point. The place seemed so cheap and crappy, though I was nearly sure she'd already found her way out. More cheap plastic skeletons lined the hallway, and at the very end there were two hanging on opposite sides of another sign. Each one was posed to pointing in different direction. The sign simply said, "Choose." I'm not sure what would have happened had I gone right. I like to think I would have walked out the door and into the low light of dusk, disappointment firm on my face and feeling righteous in my earlier annoyance with the evening's activity. I went left though, and what was waiting for me to the left I will never forget for as long as I live. I saw a wooden door that looked oddly familiar. I stood staring at it for a few seconds, trying to shake off the sense of déjà vu before reaching for the brass handle and giving it a twist. Beyond, there was no plastic trash bags or skeletons, no strobe lights or rubber bats on strings. It was just a room, a little kid's room. Again, as I stepped through the door, it slammed hard behind me, and just as before, I turned to see there was no knob on the inside. There was another sign on the inside of the door, though this one that made me feel greatly more unsettled than I was expecting that night. This sign simply said, "Kevin's room," and it was framed with rocket ships blasting off towards stars. I made that sign when I was 6. It was the sign that hung over my bedroom door in our old house, the house where my father had killed himself. I looked around the room and realized that it was exactly the room I had back then. Even the toys scattered across the floor were my toys. I swallowed hard, feeling the lump in my throat. I was overtaken by a feeling of both dread and utter confusion. "Kevin!" I heard a man yell from outside the door. "Kevin, you little snot-nose. I told you to pick up your goddamn toys in the living room." It was my father's voice, and as the door swung open, there he was, larger than life, and exactly as he was the last time I saw him. He swayed back and forth as he stepped forward into the room. The stink of booze wafted from him as he got closer and closer, continuing to grumble something about those damn toys. I backed up, just like I would have when I was little, and I was scared of what he might do. "Look at you," he growled at me, already removing his belt. "You grew up exactly like I thought you would. A skinny, weak, pathetic little shit." He folded the belt in his hands and cracked it hard against the bedpost. My back hit the wall and I felt completely lost. It was impossible. He was dead, and he'd been dead for almost 10 years. "This isn't fucking real," I shouted at him. "You're gone, and I haven't had to deal with your bullshit in forever. You were a drunk and coward, and I'm glad you're dead. Do you hear me, Dad, you fucking bastard? I'm glad you're dead." As the last words left my mouth, I watched his face fill with sorrow. He dropped the belt on the floor and looked me in the eyes as he reached behind his back. Slowly, he pulled a chrome .38 pistol out from behind his back and put it to his temple. The frown on his face curled up into a smile, and suddenly he winked at me as if I was being let in on some kind of joke. The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the small room, and I watched the side of his head explode outward and splatter against the wall. His body crumpled down in front of me as I stood there screaming, and crying. I dropped to my knees in front of him and stared down, smoke drifting out of the hole in his temple and blood pooling around his face. The door on the other side of the room creaked open, and I looked up to see Alyssa standing there, a look of terror and confusion on her face. I stood up and rushed towards her, not knowing what else to do, and just wanting to leave that goddamned room as fast as possible. I could hear her asking questions, but my ears were still ringing from the gunshot, and I doubt I was in any state to answer, even if they weren't. I was only a couple steps away from her when I felt something grip my ankle and send me sprawling to the floor. I turned to look at what had caught my foot, and I saw my father's corpse holding on tightly. He raised his head up to look at me with blood-filled eyes. The flesh was starting to peel away off of his face, and he opened his mouth to expose a mass of maggots that had begun feeding on his tongue. I could hear Alyssa screaming and felt her hands grabbing for mine, trying to pull me away from the rotting yet now spastically lively corpse of my father. "Don't let the fucking door close!" I screamed to her as I kicked at the rotting body that refused to let go of me. My heel caught his jaw and it came clean off of his face, the writhing mass of maggots landing on the powder blue carpet. "Jesus fuck, please God, get me out of here," I shouted more as Alyssa pulled. "You're just like me," I heard my father somehow say in a gurgling, failing voice. "You're just like me, and you'll end up just like me." With my other foot, I kicked at the hand that was holding me and watched the fingers come apart like wet paper. I got free, and Alyssa pulled me to my feet, nearly yanking my shoulder from the socket. I could hear my father's guttural drunken laughter echo in the room even as his body fell apart as it was devoured by the maggots it seemed to be hosting. Nothing but food for the flies. Ha 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 ha. Alyssa led me out through the door as I continued screaming like a maniac. I could still hear the laughter behind me as door slammed shut. I don't know how long I lay on the floor of that hallway, bawling my eyes out and paralyzed in utter fear. I felt sick and scared, and Alyssa kept her arms around me, no longer bothering to ask any questions. It felt like hours that we sat just below the fog line, with that strobe light bouncing off the plastic-wrapped walls. When I finally got myself collected and on my feet, Alyssa stayed close, her arms still wrapped around me. "We need to get the fuck out of here," I said, wiping the tears from my face and trying to act tough once again. "There is something seriously wrong here." She shushed me and ran her fingers through my hair in a way that should have been relaxing, but somehow made me feel unsettled. She was acting too calm for what we had just seen. "Why are you so goddamn chill?" I said, pushing her away from me and looking at her. She looked stoned, a relaxed and easy smile on her face. "I'm just happy I finally get to have some alone time with you." She moved closer again, her hand caressing my cheek. "I've always liked you so much, Kevin, but Jimmy is always hanging around. It's nice it just being us." "Alyssa, why are you telling me this now?" She was grinding her body up against me, and I could smell her shampoo as she nuzzled her face into my neck. Her lips kissed softly as her hand suddenly slid down my body and over the crotch of my jeans. I let out a slight moan as she started to rub. "Don't you want me, Kevin?" "I know you do," she whispered in my ear, grazing her teeth over the lobe as she finished. I could hear something rapping against the wooden door that led back to place where we had left the body of whatever was pretending to be my father. Alyssa stepped back from me again and started to take off her shirt, but I reached a hand out to stop her. Despite whatever raging teenage hormones I may have had, even I knew something was completely off. "We have to get the fuck out of here." "What are you doing?" I said sternly, grabbing her by the wrist. She shook my hand away and backed off further down the hall. Tears suddenly started to fill her eyes. "Are you rejecting me?" she shouted. "How could you do this? Don't you like me? Don't you want me?" Her suddenly shrill scream filled the hallway as she began peeling off her clothes frantically. I watched as she stripped down to her underwear in stunned silence. The rapping on the door next to us became increasingly intense with each layer she removed. "Alyssa, what the hell is wrong with you?" I was in a panic. I wanted to run, but didn't want to just leave her there naked in that hallway. I tried to run over to her and she pushed me away screaming. She began to claw at her skin, leaving long bleeding scratch marks over her chest and stomach. "Don't you think I'm fucking beautiful, Kevin?" She was tearing chunks of her own flesh off now and discarding them on the ground with her clothes. "Isn't this what you want from me?" I watched in abject horror as she finally peeled away the skin from her torso, exposing the bleeding muscle beneath. Fat and sinew fell off her shredded body as she removed more of her skin. The rapping against the door grew louder and louder, sounding more like someone slamming all their weight against the door as she screamed and cackled like a maniac. Fear overtook me and turned to run down the other hallway, towards what I hoped would be the exit. I felt her slimy, blood-drenched hand reach out and grab my arm tightly before she slammed me up against the wall with more strength than I could have imagined. I wheezed as all the air left my lungs, and I felt her body, now naked from most of its skin, press against me. She once again nuzzled her face up to my neck, and I gagged, feeling her shredded flesh press to my body. "Don't you want to fuck me, Kevin?" she whispered, before finally leaning back far enough that I could see her face. The skin began to slough off her face, leaving bulging eyeballs in an exposed, blood-stained skull. Her lipless mouth opened, and she leaned in to kiss me, with a protruding tongue. I pooled all my strength and finally shoved her away from me, leaving her staggered enough that I could break into a sprint. I could hear her wailing and cackling behind me as I ran through the disorienting fog and strobing lights, looking for some way out of that fucking maze. I saw more signs but ignored any that didn't say exit. I didn't want any more. The spook house won, and I was fucking terrified beyond anything I had ever felt. It seemed never-ending and grew more and more disturbing as I ran. The plastic skeletons hanging from the walls were now limbless corpses with dangling entrails, and the trash liners on the walls felt slick with slime and blood every time I ran into one. My heart was racing, and with each corner, I turned only to find another hallway. I became convinced I was going to die in there. The voices of both Alyssa and my father followed me as I frantically searched for some way out. "Don't you want me? Just like me. Kevin, this is meant to be. Food for the flies." I clapped my hands over my ears, trying my best to block them out as I filled the air with the sound of my own screams. I thought I was going to lose my mind and nearly lost all hope when I suddenly came to a hallway that was a dead end. There was one last sign above the door. It was written in that same cheesy, spooky writing, blood drips and all, and appeared black in the strobing lights. "Exit." I laughed manically and ran up to the door, pulling on it in the vain hopes that it would just fly open and I would be greeted by the chill air of the October evening. It didn't move, though. No matter how much I wrenched on the door handle, it wouldn't budge, and I could hear the voices getting closer behind me. "You get under my skin, Kevin. You're going to rot with the maggots, son." They sounded like they were right behind me, but I couldn't bring myself to look. I just kept pulling on the door handle and screaming out for someone to save me. I could feel every nightmare I ever had breathing down my neck, laughing, screaming, and preparing itself to pull me apart, body and soul. I heard one final voice, the voice of a young child. "Turn around," was all it said. Slowly I turned my head to look and saw the boy in the devil mask standing a few feet from me. Behind the rubber demon's face, I knew he was smiling. "What the fuck do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice lacking any hope. The boy just stood staring with dead yellow eyes as the entire world fell silent. "Boo!" he suddenly shouted, lunging forward and startling me into the door. I felt the hinges swing open as my back hit the wood and I went tumbling out into the crisp autumn air. As I fell backward onto my ass into the dirt, I heard the door slam shut as the faint giggling of a child's laughter could be heard behind it. I sat there stunned, unable to process that I was free even as I stared at the outside of the spook house. The fake plastic skeletons and pumpkin lights still strung up around the outside. "Kevin!" I heard Jimmy shouting from what seemed like miles away. I only realized he was right next to me when he grabbed me under my shoulder to try and lift me to my feet. "Dude, are you okay?" I stared at him with a blank expression on my face, trying to find words to explain what had just happened to me. Behind him, I could see Alyssa, her head hanging down and her face solemn and broken, and I knew what I'd seen inside the haunted house hadn't been her at all. "We need to go," I whispered. I could hear Mr. Patterson standing by the door laughing a sly little laugh. "We need to go now." Was it that bad? What happened in there? I was feeling sick, and I never actually went in. It couldn't be that bad. Jimmy's voice was making my head hurt, and I wanted to leave. I just wanted to get as far away from that place as possible. "It was bullshit," I heard Alyssa say, her eyes locking to mine as I looked up at her. It was just a bullshit haunted house that wasted all our time. Kevin's right. We need to go now. She started walking towards the car, and I followed, fine with not saying another thing about what I saw inside, and having no desire to ask what she had seen either. Jimmy followed us. He kept asking questions, the confusion clear as day on his face, but I could do nothing but tune him out. As we got in the car and drove away, I saw Mr. Patterson standing by the door waving us goodbye, the little boy in the devil mask standing at his side. When we got back to school, Jimmy told people we had gone, but no one else had gotten a flyer and no one knew that there was ever a haunted house up at the Patterson farm. People asked Alyssa and I both what had happened, but we never said a word, and when people got bored of asking, I thanked God. One of the last times someone tried to ask me about it in class, I ended up shouting at them to stop asking me about Patterson Farm. A teacher overheard the exchange and asked what it was all about. I tried to tell her it was nothing, just something that happened at a spook house at Patterson Farm on Halloween. I can still remember the confused look on her face as she told me that there was no haunted house at Patterson Farm. In fact, she said the place had been abandoned for over a year, ever since Phineas Patterson had died. When a real estate agent tries to sell a haunted house, the house was located on a street called Rockadundee Road in Hampton, Massachusetts. The surrounding area is enveloped in dense New England forests, and Rockadundee Road was no exception. It's a stretch of unpaved road through dark woods that eventually leads into Stafford, Connecticut. There were several homes on this road, and one of them was for sale. The family asked my real estate agency to help sell it, and I drew the short end of the straw on this one. When I arrived to the house, my first thought was, why would anyone want to live out here in the boonies? I scowled at the dirt that clung to my car from traveling down the unpaved road. I wondered where the closest car wash was as I approached the front door and knocked. A wiry-looking man with a balding scalp and thick glasses welcomed me inside. He showed me around the house. Despite the fact that it was built in the 1800s, its interior was beautiful. Nice hardwood floors and crisp, clean walls. The house came with 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and with the family asking so little for it, it was basically a steal. The homeowner gave me a tour of the house, as well as a list of things to tell my clients: septic system, knob and tube electrical wiring, etc. Our footsteps clacked on the hardwood floor as he showed me all the lighting fixtures and electrical outlets. I'll spare you from any further jargon that's associated with home inspection for the sake of the story. The homeowner took his leave, but before he did, he turned to me and asked, "Do you believe in ghosts?" I bit my tongue. Such beliefs were unacceptable in my profession. When I politely told him no, he merely shrugged his shoulders and climbed in his truck. I watched his vehicle kick up a storm of dust as he disappeared down the road. That was the last I saw of the homeowner. I glanced at my watch. The open house I was hosting today was supposed to start at noon. I had 2 hours to myself in the middle of nowhere. I grabbed my Kindle from the car and head back inside. I'm the type of person that needs silence when reading. There are people who can read while the TV's on, and others who can read in bustling cafes. I preferred my reading time to be quiet. Otherwise, I'd read through paragraphs upon paragraphs without absorbing anything. It was during my reading time when I first noticed it, the complete silence of the place. It wasn't just any silence. It was like there was an actual absence of sound. I was accustomed to hearing cars outside and neighbors walking their barking dogs, but here, I heard nothing, not even the sounds of birds singing in nature. I could only hear my heart faintly beating in my chest. I also noticed that it was quite chilly in here. The spacious rooms and lack of furniture must have created some sort of draft in the house. My teeth chattered nonetheless, and I zipped up my coat to my chin and continued to read. When I felt like I couldn't bear it any longer, I stood up and went to go find the thermostat. The thermostat was located near the door of the basement. I cranked it up to 75 when I heard a sudden whooshing noise coming from downstairs. My heart skipped a beat. It sounded like there was a faucet running in the basement. I swung open the door, and the uninviting darkness of the basement greeted me. I fumbled for the light switch and descended down the rickety wooden stairs. The basement was unfinished and creepy looking. The single light bulb did a poor job at illumination, and the corners of the room were swallowed by darkness. Furniture that had been left behind by the previous family had been covered with grimy white sheets. They watched on like silent specters as I approached the source of the noise, a sink near the washing machine and dryer. Not wanting to spend too much time down here, I hurried over and spun the valve shut. As I hustled up the stairs, I got that weird feeling you get as a child that there was a monster lurking at the bottom of the steps, waiting for me to turn around. I slammed the door shut, fighting the urge to glance over my shoulder. I rested my back against the door to the basement and took several deep breaths. The hairs all over my body pricked as I chased away the grips of old childhood fears. I was an adult now. I could rationalize. I had just started to calm down when I heard the front door swing open, followed by the sound of footsteps on the hardwood floor. Clack, clack, clack. They were heading in my direction. Thinking it was the homeowner, it was still too early for clients. I stepped around the corner to meet him. I was surprised to see nobody standing there. The door, however, was wide open and was currently letting a few leaves blow in from the outside. I called out timidly, "Hello?" When there was no answer, I closed the door and decided to do a sweep of the house in case someone had decided to come in. I nervously poked my head in every room. They were all empty. I sat back down with my Kindle and thought about what the homeowner had asked me. "Do you believe in ghosts?" echoed in my head. I shuddered. I couldn't sell a haunted house. My company wouldn't even acknowledge it, let alone accept it. Telling a client that the house they were looking at was potentially haunted was a sure way to lose a sale. I couldn't afford to lose a sale, not in this economy, so I did what any salesperson would do. I would lie. The next hour was as quiet as the previous one had been. I started to think that I had merely hallucinated the sounds of the footsteps. My rational mind told me that the door had opened on its own, and since I was still shaking off the irrational fear of a monster in the basement, my hearing had just created the sensation of footsteps on its own. As for the running water, there was probably some weird trip between the thermostat and the faucet downstairs, if that made sense. I had another light scare when there was a knock at the door. Thankfully, there was someone there, a young couple, looking to buy the house. I invited them in and showed them around. They were impressed with the house and its location. They had a baby on the way and wanted to raise it in a quiet environment. Things were going smoothly until the lights started to flicker. When the husband looked at me for an explanation, I told him, "With older houses such as this one, you sometimes face problems with the wiring. This one, for example, was built with knob and tube wiring. The previous families never had an issue with it, but I'm sure an electrician could be called in to take a look at it." That's basically how my open house went. There would be some weird phenomenon, and I would have to debunk it on the spot. At the end of it, I even convinced myself that there was nothing paranormal going on with the house. Several times during my appointments with clients, a faucet would turn on. Sometimes it was the basement sink, but mostly it was the kitchen sink that turned itself on. As I went over to turn it off, I told them that there was a small problem with the plumbing and that a plumber would be able to fix it. There were a few instances of hearing the sounds of footsteps or rustling. I would then assure my clients that it was nothing more than the house settling in or the sound of squirrels running around on the roof. I was surprisingly good at covering this ghost's tracks. I think I even made up a few words that would put my clients' nerves at ease. Once I had successfully wrapped up my session, I was anxious to get home. The frigidness of the house had left my bones achy and in need of a hot shower. I gathered my belongings and started heading out when I caught a glimpse of a pair of shoes at the top of the stairs. My eyes slowly shifted to the top of the stairs, where a young boy of about 5 years stood on the second-floor landing. The boy was wearing faded overalls and was sporting a homemade bowl cut. He smirked at me in a playful way, like kids do when they have a secret to tell. "Hello," I called to him in a soft voice. "Did your parents leave you behind, little boy?" He didn't answer me, but I kept asking him questions as I slowly climbed the stairs toward him. "What is your name? Where's your mom and dad?" When I got to about halfway up the stairs, the boy let out a high-pitched giggle and scampered down the hallway. Not thinking much of it, I followed him. When I climbed the final step, I found him waiting outside one of the bedrooms. He drew a finger to his lips in a shushing motion, then ran into the room. I let out a sigh of frustration and chased him into the room. I had only been a few strides behind him, but it was like he had vanished into thin air. I searched the empty space. I poked my head in the closet. I even banged my hand around the walls, looking for a trap door this kid could have been hiding in. I didn't find the young boy, but I did find something. Out in the hallway, a folded piece of paper had been left behind. When I picked it up and inspected it, there was a note on it, written in the scrawling penmanship of a young child. "Stay away from Sarah." I was baffled and a little creeped out. Hearing stuff was one thing, but actually seeing another person and finding notes was an entirely different game. I left the house in a hurry and peeled away down the dirt road, away from the young boy and Sarah, whoever she was. When I got home that night, I took a long, hot shower, trying to forget the events of the day. The image of the creepy boy burned in my retina, and the sound of his laughter echoed in my ears. I was afraid of closing my eyes for too long in fear of coming face to face with the boy, or something much worse. My fear bubbled inside me like a fever. I took out my laptop and began researching Rockadundee Road. I had several hits of urban legends surrounding that place, so I began reading through the accounts, trying to separate the facts from fiction. Turns out, Rockadundee Road is believed to be a very haunted place. There are witnesses who had seen strange lights in the woods and nooses hanging from the trees. They also reported phantom cars that had tried to run them off the road. There's a lake nearby where a girl drowned. Witnesses claim to have seen this girl sitting on the rocks on the opposite side of the lake in light of the full moon. There is also a cemetery on Rockadundee where various people reported a feeling of uneasiness. The more I sifted through the stories, the more afraid I became. I came across two stories that supported what I saw. One was about a young boy who was killed on the road by a drunk driver. The other was about a woman who lived near the cemetery I mentioned above. Rumor has it that late-night motorists would experience car troubles in front of the cemetery. While they were busy trying to start their car, this woman would come out of the woods wielding a hatchet. Her name was Sarah. I'd been warned that my house is haunted. To be fair, the warning came after I bought it. To be even more fair, the agent didn't hide its grisly history. She told me all about it. Some 20 years ago, the wife had run off with a young lover. That drove the husband insane, and he had murdered their young daughter, who reminded him too much of her mother. Since then, the house changed hands a few times, with the latest owners hurriedly returning to Europe due to a family emergency of some sort. I commended the agent for her honesty. The house is going for 20% cheaper than comparable properties in the area. She pursed her lips at me. She was in her late 40s, fit and dressed in a sharp suit. For some reason, she reminded me of Julie Andrews. In my experience, when it comes to a bargain this good, people won't hesitate for any silly, superstitious reason. I don't expect this house to be on the market for much longer. I took the hint and placed the offer. It was a lovely little house, really. It came furnished, with cushy rugs in every room and solid wooden furniture. With my single suitcase of clothes and into much else, I moved in over the course of an afternoon and took that first stroll around my new home. Quaint little place, paint peeling from the walls, sofa in the living room creaking, all kinds of rustic charm. I considered phoning my family to let them know I moved, but only my brother would care, and he lived overseas anyway, wasn't about to visit. I don't hate my family or anything like that. We're just complicated. That night, I slept uneasily in my new bed, curled up on the sheets that still smelled of the store. I dreamt of a river flowing through the hills, and an old man so emaciated it was a miracle he could stand. An old man in ragged clothes with long, wispy hair. I woke up concerned. My first warning came the day after. I was walking home when a young girl, no older than 10, ran right into me. We both yelped and she landed squarely on her ass. "You all right?" I helped her up. She squinted at me suspiciously. "Who are you?" The question took me aback. "I live here?" I gestured towards my house. She squinted even harder. "No, I live here." "Olivia." A young woman walked up. "No, Another girl, barely 16 under all the makeup. Don't make a scene. Are you our new neighbor? I am Kathy. Yeah, I just moved into number 20. Kathy gave me an appraising glance, then bent down to fiddle with her shoe and gave me a generous view of her cleavage. I smiled uncomfortably. Oh! Olivia's eyes went wide. He's the man who lives in the haunted house. I almost laughed at the horror movie absurdity of it. There I was, having just moved into a house with a history of bloodshed, and now this kid with her wholesome all-American face and ponytails and a mini t-shirt was telling me about the ghost in my house. Haunted? Just ignore her. She loves making up stupid stories. Come, Mom's waiting. Kathy hauled her sister off. At home, I went to wash my hands and stared long and hard into the mirror. A thin man with deep wrinkles around his sunken, tired eyes stared back. Yeah, I wasn't looking good, and to top it off I was wearing a shirt 3 sizes too large. A mystery why Kathy decided I was worth seducing, although at that age girls tested their sexuality on everyone they met. Ironically, in that very moment my phone vibrated with a text from my brother. Haven't heard from you in ages, Nick. How are you? Have you been eating well? Good old Dennis, doing his best impression of a middle-aged aunt. That night, I dreamt of the old man again, his stick-thin figure swaying as he walked through tall stalks of grass. Every step came with immense effort, but he moved on, down through the hills towards my little house. I woke up shivering. Logically, I knew I was safe, yet I sat in my bed sweating through my IKEA blankets until early dawn. As I was drifting off back to sleep, I could have sworn I heard something rattling in the kitchen, but it could have been another dream. I saw Olivia again the next morning. She was trying to fix a broken strap on her school bag. I tied it off the best I could. Thank you. It works now. No problem, kid. Sorry to disappoint you, but my house might not be haunted. At least I haven't seen any ghosts yet. That's 'cause she's shy. Shy? Yeah, she takes a while to come out. She's not mean, really. She's just bored and wants to have fun. The kid's eyes shone with morbid excitement as she retold me the local urban legend. It's amazing how well children took to horror stories. I wondered if Olivia paid any thought to the fact the supposed ghost was just a couple years younger than her. But then, it would probably make things all the more thrilling. When I walked into my house, there was a sound coming from the living room, just on the edge of my hearing, low enough I couldn't actually discern what it was, almost like TV working, but I definitely hadn't touched it. I went to check anyway, but the beat-up old TV that came with the house was lifeless, a gray box covered in dust with remote nowhere to be seen. That night, I was woken by the sounds of TV absolutely, definitely working. I shot up in bed, my whole body tense. Eventually, I crawled from under my blankets and walked to the living room. I needed to know what was going on. There it was, that old TV playing a colorful cartoon. What channel even played kids' cartoons at 2 a.m.? I searched for remote, all the while trying to come up with a possible non-supernatural explanation. But in the dark of the night, ghost stories were very convincing. Eventually, I found the remote, turned the TV off, and tried to leave the room. As I grasped the doorknob, an ungodly screech rang through the house, and I screamed too. I looked desperately around and saw that it was the TV, back on. The cartoon characters were singing, and the volume was fully up, turning the harmless kid's song into a deafening cacophony. I reached for the remote with sweaty, shaking palms. From there on, it continued. The noises and nuisances. The TV and radio were turning on at random times. I would leave a sandwich or a piece of cake on a counter and find it half-eaten, and sometimes, as I was trying to fall asleep, I would hear it. A child's joyful, unrestrained laughter. Against all these signs, I stubbornly persevered, stalking through the dusty halls of my house, paler and thinner with each dawn. It all came to a head one rainy November night. I went to bed sweaty and feverish. Odd sounds throughout the house interrupted my sleep. I tossed and turned, and then, at one point, I looked to the window. There I saw the old man, his bony face pressed against the window. He opened his mouth wide, smearing grime from his lips and tongue on the glass pane. I screamed and thrashed out of the bed. I knew it was a dream. I knew, but my fear took over, and I stumbled blindly into the hallway. I saw her then, a tiny girl in a pink dress, hair all done up, face a ruined, shattered mess where her father had smashed with a club 5 times to wipe that whore's smile off her face. She turned towards me, holding bits of her skull in place with her little hands, and tilted her head to one side curiously. Then she disappeared. I stood in my hallway, naked and clammy and angry. I was done with the nonsense. Within a day, I sold the TV and the radio. Wasn't ever a big fan anyway. I stopped eating at home, stopped even appearing there during the day, and went straight to bed as soon as I returned. That's where the call from my brother found me as I was about to turn off the lights. "How are you, Nick?" His voice boomed through the line, in stark contrast to my own weak tone. "Been better. You sound half dead, man. Are you sick? What's wrong? Have you been eating right?" "I've made some stupid choices." A drop of dark liquid hit my hand. "Yeah, I real messed up, but I'm going to be fine. Do you need help?" A rush of warmth came over me, a wave of love for my brother. Whatever else he was always there for me. "No, I got it." As another drop fell on my face, I looked up. Blood was seeping through the ceiling. The thing in my house noticed I didn't want to play anymore, and it got angry. Its laughter in the night turned into horrifying screams. Rugs wet with blood squelched under my feet. Whole racks of plates and shelves of books ended up broken or torn apart on the floor. I spent the days in the living room, cowering from the sounds and making no effort to hide. She came for me, eventually. Her form had changed. Her figure was grotesquely swollen, misshapen. Blood streamed down her body, and bits of brain and bone fell out of her smashed skull. She appeared on the top of the stairs as I was in the kitchen, getting water. With a high-pitched wail, she descended towards me. I sunk to the floor and whimpered as she approached. It was all I could do, that, and reflect on the irony. She had been in the same spot in the kitchen 20 years ago when her father went down the stairs with the club. She saw that I was afraid, like her father must have seen that day, and she lunged for me. I met her straight on, and I took her down, and I devoured her whole. She tried to fight, of course. It, whatever they are, those apparitions. She wasn't strong enough. All the fear she saw from me in those days had been nothing but a bait to make her bold and angry. I would have normally waited for her to fatten up a bit, but I was in a rush. I ate her until nothing was left, and went to sleep right there on the kitchen floor. For the first time in a while, I slept peacefully. In the morning, I bounded up the stairs for a shower. In the mirror, I saw myself, a tall, well-built man, the wrinkles gone from my face, my hair once again a mess of shiny black curls. I smiled and snapped a selfie and sent it to my brother. Even someone as old as me is allowed to be a little vain. Looking good, he responded almost immediately. "Now, when are you gonna get your ass over here? You don't want to see your nieces?" I set the phone aside and hopped into the shower. In the mirror, I saw a dark figure right behind me, the skeletal old man, no longer menacing. I looked him straight into the eye. I came close this time, too close. But now, as I watched, the ghastly messenger slowly disappeared into thin air. After all, I've been eating.